our favorite shows of 2024, and wrapping up the year for Apple TV Plus. This is TV Plus Talk on MacVoices.
Hello and welcome to TV Plus Talk. We finally made it back. Life has been a little bit crazy, but I'm here and he's Chuck Joyner. Hello.
Hello, Charlotte. Yes, life has been crazy, and I think it's only fair to say it's been crazy on both sides. So
just a bit, but we're back together and I'm very pleased about it.
I am too. I feel bad about the fact that we haven't gotten to discuss a few things that have happened with Apple TV Plus, but life sometimes gets in the way.
Yes, I realised I also introduced myself as here. I'm Charlotte Henry, but I am here, so that's good. Well, given that we finally made it to December, we're going to do a bit of a wrap-up of the year. We'll start, I think, with our favourite shows of the year. Now, you and I are generally in agreement on this, but there was one show that you loved that I haven't actually got into yet, so maybe you want to talk about that.
Yeah, Charlotte proposed that we talk about our favorite shows for this year. And the one that I really didn't see coming but just blew me away was Dark Matter. And if you haven't seen it, it's a genre, it's a sci-fi genre kind of thing that is very twisty and turny. And I love things like that, especially in the sci-fi genre that really do surprise you with the story plots and storylines. And this one, I'd not read any of the books or anything, so I went in completely cold and absolutely loved it, became obsessed with it. So now I know it's up for season 2 the last time I looked, and I'm really looking forward to that. But that had to be my number one out of a long list of really great shows this year.
You generally like the Apple TV Plus sci-fi stuff, actually. Often when we're talking about shows that we like, you often highlight some in the sci-fi genre. And we've said before, and I think every time you bring up one of these examples, you only prove the point. Apple has really made a pretty decent niche for itself in the sci-fi space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in looking at my favorites, Foundation comes to mind. For All Mankind is another one that's right up there. I mean, that's it. It's so tough, even in that genre, for my particular interest, to pick just one because they're all high quality shows and worth your time.
Yeah, I think they've done. Look, I'm not a huge sci-fi person. Depends what it is, but particularly the more fantasy-focused kind of sci-fi, if that makes sense. But it's pretty obvious to me that Apple has really done well in this space. A show I loved this year, well, there was a couple. One we agree on, which is Shrinking, which I really enjoyed as well. It's comedy. I think Bill Lawrence is on it again. There's Jason Segel as a star. Season 2 is there. I'm working my way through it. And it's just great. It's a good mix of the fun and the serious. The characters are great. The character development is great. I've really enjoyed it as a series.
I agree 100%. And so you seem to have a little bit broader top level taste. But I also think that you make a great point. Just like with the sci-fi genre, I think Apple TV Plus has done a pretty good job in the comedy genre. And so if you're really into comedies, here we go again. It's a nice place to go and get some very high quality comedy shows.
Yeah, I think it got, stand by for the buzzer because I'm going to say it. I think it got a bit of confidence after Ted Lasso, actually, that it could do these kind of 30-minute-ish, sometimes it gets a bit indulgent, comedy shows, and people would really buy into them. And I think that's happened, I think that has really been the case on the back of, as I say, Ted Lasso, and Shrinking is a really great example of it. I really enjoy that show. Another one you and I agree on. Oh, go on.
Well, it just occurred to me that I compare Shrinking and I think I know what's coming next, but I won't spoil it for you. But if you take those and compare them to the comedies that Network TV is trying to foist off on us, it's really intriguing. I mean, Network TV has the benefit of just being free over the air or on regular cable. Sure. But I see them completely different. I can't say that. I don't even remember the last network TV comedy show that I paid any attention to. And yet when the Apple TV Plus stuff comes out, it's like, yeah, I'll give it a try. And especially if you recommend something, but across the board, it just seems to work so much better than the formulas that the networks put out.
Yeah, I have to say, I can't think of here in the UK, I can't think of the last comedy I settled down to. There's been some good dramas here in the UK. But yeah, you're right about on the comedy side of it. There seems to be the streamers in general that are leading the way with that. And Apple TV Plus is doing a good job being part of it. It really, really is. And it is a good space to be in. Who doesn't like comedy? And I have to say, look, we get imported here in the UK a lot of your comedies. You know, that 21, 22-minute comedy with 2-3 breaks, the Will and Graces, the Friends, all of that stuff, and all the stuff that went through Disney and still gone through Disney. So there's loads of that has made its way to the UK. And look, some of them are great, but they're kind of formulaic, aren't they? And I think, and some of the reason we like them is because there's a formula, right? So, we know who the love interests are. We get the vibe, the first 12 minutes, things are a bit difficult. The next 11, everything works out okay, etc., etc., etc. But Apple is a little bit cleverer, and the streamers in general, I think, have the capacity to do this. They're a little bit cleverer with their comedy, aren't they?
I think so, and I think they also have the advantage of having, and as viewers, we always want more, but they keep it to short runs. They
Yes.
don't. You don't have a 20 or 30 episode season, which has got to be hard on everybody. And so I feel like that gives them more time to focus on the quality, and not just have to be ready for this season or that season or the big fall premiere seasons.
Yeah.
They can launch anything they want anytime they want.
Yeah, because if you look through like the back catalogue of Friends and Will and Grace, there's 20 plus episodes a season.
Yeah, and that's tough to come up with storylines that are even with a formula that are anywhere near compelling.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of jokes to keep writing.
Yeah.
And also I think there's more of a emotional flow. Shrinking really does. Shrinking starts pretty seriously, and there is a sad undertone to Shrinking, but it never loses, I think, the funny and the charm. Well, you know what I thought of, say, season 2 of Ted Lasso, a bit of season 3, where it took itself far too seriously. I think so far what I've seen of Shrinking, it isn't doing that. And it's really clever and all the better for it.
I would agree. It's I think you just brought up exactly what I was saying, that the idea that there's more time, that there's more depth to it, that it's not like having, oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but it's not like having a fast food meal. It's more like sitting down to, a well-cooked, little bit more sophisticated meal. That, it just, I'm not watching these things in the background like I might have done with some of the other things. You want to watch them. And even if you decide you're going to watch them in the background, you still get sucked in.
Yeah, I mean, you can have episodes of Friends watching on, not just because while you're doing the ironing or something in the background, and not just because you've seen them 25 times each.
Yeah, exactly.
Another show we both loved this year, and I really hope we'll continue to love going into the future, is Slow Horses. This, to me, is the next show from Apple TV Plus that's really, really broken through. I think it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. I think Gary Oldman is brilliant. I think all the actors and the characters are brilliant. I'm shocked by it sometimes. I find myself sort of gasping out loud at some of the bits of it. I think it's brilliant. I really enjoy it.
I'm right there with you, and I think it's interesting that, let's see, what we're about to have season 5. I think that's what Tim Cook was in.
Yeah, and I think
recently.
Up to season 6, haven't they?
I don't know. I've lost track.
I think they've done a couple of seasons. It's obviously doing pretty well.
Well, it's doing well because of the consistency, and I don't mean that like we were just criticizing consistency, but it's always compelling. It's a little bit different storyline. There are a few twists. The characters are deep and rich, and you either love them or don't love them for whatever reason. But
and sometimes both. You can love
Yeah,
and hate the characters at the same time.
Yep. Yeah. So and I have to say that given that it's more of it's more focused on your side of the pond. Sometimes I have a little bit of trouble with those because I don't always get all the metaphors and everything.
Mm.
Some of the metaphors I've had to learn, but even if I didn't understand the metaphors, it doesn't detract from the show. And so,
go on, what's the language you've had to look up?
Oh boy.
What have you put into translation apps?
I don't even know now because now I do it once and then it's in my head. But those kind of things, but that to me is part of the joy of it. That it is not the standard fare here, and I'm sure you sometimes do the same thing with American shows.
Sure.
Try to figure out what the heck we're talking about.
Oh, for sure. I think they've got a real hit with it. I mean, the way the character of Jackson Lamb has developed is brilliant. The way that whole office has developed is brilliant. I'm going to keep plowing through it. I really, really enjoy it. I have to confess, on season 2, I had to do a lot of concentration to follow the storyline with the various Russians and everything else. But it was, really, really good. It's been a real hit for them, and that's interesting because you wouldn't thought a kind of not niche, but it isn't Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, right? Gary Oldman is a big famous actor in his own right, but he's not Jennifer Aniston, and he's not Leo DiCaprio. But
right.
To have broken through like that, I think is fantastic.
It almost feels like that we often think about how some actors just seem to be born to play a role. And, if it happens early in their career, sometimes they get typecast. But I feel like this one, he's born to play Jackson Lamb.
He's brilliant, isn't he?
He is Jackson Lamb. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
He's just utterly, utterly brilliant. If you haven't, for some reason, watched Slow Horses, finish listening or watching this podcast episode and then immediately start watching season 1 of Slow Horses because it's truly, truly excellent. I guess then we should move on to what we're looking forward to next year.
I agree. Let's do it.
Right. So for me, you know the answer to this. You could have answered on my behalf. But you know that I'm counting down the days to the 29th of January when season 4 of Mythic Quest appears in the TV app. You made a really good point earlier about the kind of journey that the Apple TV Plus comedies go on. And I think Mythic Quest is a great example of this because most of the time it's hilarious. And because of that, when they want to make a serious point, it really, really lands. The obvious example that you and I constantly refer back to, actually, is the brilliant, brilliant COVID episodes of Mythic Quest, which they did utterly brilliantly. I've said it a million times, and I'll keep saying it a million more times. They covered the COVID and the pandemic the best of any show I think I followed. And they did it brilliantly. And that, to me, demonstrated the dexterity, is that the word, of the show and the script of the writers. Because they could do loads of hilarious things and then have these really high emotion moments. They've done it in other ways as well. Some of the relationships between the characters and the way they do that is so subtly and brilliantly done, and then they'll just have these amazing laugh out loud moments as well. So I am very excited for that. Are you going to be watching that?
Absolutely. Mythic Quest is exactly the kind of show that I would never have given the time of day had Ken Ray not really said, you have to try this. And once I tried it again.
Oh, it wasn't me that nagged you into submission. It was Ken.
It was Ken that, both of you did, but I think he pushed me over the edge.
Okay, good.
But
well done.
But much to my surprise, I absolutely enjoyed it. I agree with your assessment on the serious parts versus the comedic parts, and not everyone's going to agree with this comment. But I feel like Mythic Quest isn't silly; it's funny. It's not silly, and that's what that appeals to me. So many of the comedies that we are disparaging, they come across to me as silly.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not disparaging Friends or Will and Grace. They're some of my favourite shows of all time. But they're just different.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. But there are some just silly comedies out there that seem to satisfy a need, and that's great if that's your thing. But we're right back to it that there are levels and depth to Mythic Quest, and so I'm with you. I am absolutely looking forward to it, and I would tell anyone if go back and watch the first season, and just because the pandemic is behind us, don't think that you shouldn't pay attention to those episodes and evaluate them the way we're talking about, because they hold up. You can watch them now, and
they're so clever.
Well, they're clever. They also, now we have a little perspective on what we all went through during the pandemic, and it can, I think, help you come to terms with some of that and realize that maybe if you were one of those that was having trouble, you were not the only one, and they deal with it very, very well.
Very well. I couldn't agree with you more. Which makes us even more excited because in March there is a spin-off series of Mythic Quest coming. 26th of March it goes live. It's called it's called Side Quest, which is really, really brilliant. I'm fascinated to see what they do with that. But they call it an expansion of the Mythic Quest universe. And I'll read the description from the Apple TV Plus PR website if you'd like, because I think it sums it up. It says, an expansion of the Mythic Quest universe, Side Quest explores the lives of employees, players and fans who are impacted by the game in an anthology format. I'm really looking forward to seeing this as well.
Yeah, I agree. Because if you've seen it, I haven't, which if they're going to focus on any particular set of employees or whether there's just going to be, a different employee or random employees at a time.
Yes.
But there's so much meat to those employees to go and explore outside
the point,
specific.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. The point is not, from what I understand, that we're going to see employees from the Mythic Quest company, which is what we see in the main series. This, from what I'm reading, seems to be, if you work in a game shop and you're impacted by Mythic Quest or you play the game, that's how I'm interpreting it. I'm sure we'll see some of the central characters drop in and out at different points, but I don't think the company is the focus of the Side Quest series, which I think could be fun.
Got it. Good. I was not clear on that, but
yeah.
Again, there's with what they've done in the show with the game. It'd be very interesting to see that other side of it too. So, I definitely one I would at least sample and probably devour.
Yeah, we got to go through it. We can pretend it's for work if you want. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think there's a risk? And I don't want to be negative after you and I looking so forward to these shows. Do you think there is a risk with any of them? From 6 seasons or whatever of Slow Horses, from Mythic Quest, 4 seasons of Mythic Quest plus a spin-off show, etc., etc., etc. Do you think there is a risk of overkill?
Overkill in the sense of too much of a series?
In the sense of it loses the quality as a result of quantity?
That's a great question. But I feel like that's been avoided with just about any Apple TV Plus show you name.
So far, I agree with you.
Yeah, now some have been canceled and some were sort of they've let them conclude. I'm back to my thing about C, that, I enjoyed it. A lot of people, that wasn't their thing. But they ran it long enough that you got a good taste for it, and then they concluded the story instead of just pulling the plug on it, and which streamers and network TVs have been known to do with annoying regularity. So
I'm sorry to interject. Talking of Side Quest, can I rant at you for 30 seconds, please, on this subject?
Hold on, let me start the timer.
Please. Okay. So I, as you know, love trashy action shows. One of the trashy action shows I was enjoying was NCIS Hawaii. Season 3, 10 episodes, ends on a cliffhanger. What happens next? We don't know because they've cancelled the show. Why would you do this to me?
Yeah, that is a rant. I forget the 30 seconds. I agree with you.
Thank you. Please continue making serious points.
Yeah, well, I think it's unfair to the audience. I think it shows gross disrespect for the audience and the time that they've invested in a given series. So, yeah, I'm right there with you.
And I think you're right. Just to bring it back to our real conversation, that Apple has tended to manage that better. It's been pretty ruthless about cancellations, but it hasn't sort of left on a cliffhanger.
Nothing that I'm aware of. Now,
No.
somebody may disagree, but nothing I'm aware
Sure.
of. I feel like they've done a really nice job of that.
Yeah, because you were a fan of C, and I can tell as a fan you're satisfied with how it ended, and okay, it's done. We can move on. Like it's sort of like finishing a book almost.
Yes, that's a great example. Yes, that's a great example. So I don't know. I feel like that Apple TV Plus has been able to avoid the trap you're talking about. I think when they end a series, they will end a series because it's time to end it, but they don't drag it out just because it's popular.
No, well, quite the opposite. They've been absolutely ruthless with things that have not been popular.
Yes. And and I mean, I'm looking at the roster here of things that I have, I'm looking forward to coming up. And now Severance is coming up, which I'm really looking forward to having come back.
That was a huge success, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I'm looking forward to the morning show coming back.
Right, I'm glad you mentioned this. Was one of the ones I wanted to discuss with you. I, as you know, liked it, got irritated with it, sort of thought it redeemed itself just a bit, but not only a little bit. As I think I said to you, it was a sort of poor version of Succession. I'm kind of still on that train, but they can redeem it. We'll see what happens. I assume we will have season 4 sometime in 2025, surely.
I would think so. The way they've been talking, I don't know when. I don't know when Foundation is coming back, but I know that that's going to continue. For All Mankind has a new season coming up, and I think there's even a spinoff on that, if I'm correct. So that's just it. If you go to the Apple TV site and scroll across, I mean, there's shows here that I want to see. Oh, by the way, C did come in at number 14 on their top chart at the moment.
Right.
Masters of the Air, I have not gotten to. There are just so many good shows here that are potentially compelling. I mean, sometimes I'm a little surprised at the number that I've actually watched because I don't usually focus. I don't focus on networks or streamers. No. I look for shows, and there's just a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah. Just a quick run through of what we know that we haven't mentioned coming up in 2025. There's a show called Prime Target that's on the 22nd of January. Kids show called Eva the Owlet. I've got to say, looks cute. That's coming also in January. In February, we've got The Gorge, Surface Season 2, Berlin ER. That's in February. In March, we've got Dope Thief, The Studio, Side Quest, which I mentioned. And in April, there's a show called Government Cheese. And in June, end of June, there's a F1 show that's coming. I'm also have to say there's Apple Original Films is doing a documentary on Fleetwood Mac, which we were joking about this before. You and I both like quite heavy music. So Fleetwood Mac are not necessarily our things. I like some of the big hits. The BBC here also used The Chain for their Formula One coverage. So it's quite a big thing here. But I think I would watch this. An iconic band, a lot of stories to tell. I don't know how in depth they'll go, given some of the, how can I put this delicately, tensions between various band members, but it could be fun.
Oh, I will absolutely watch it. I mean, it's not something that I've as soon as it hits the stream that I will pick up. I'll slot it in, but tensions is a good, nice, polite word. Some great some great stories there. We've heard a lot about them. Even if you are not a Fleetwood Mac fan, you couldn't have not heard about some of those things.
Right.
So how they will be depicted and how well they will be done is up for grabs. But again, Apple TV Plus, you feel like it's got to be at least something you want to watch.
Yeah, look, it's really fun. I guess that brings us then, not quite to the end of the show, but a chance to step back and consider where, Apple TV Plus launched in November 2019. We're now at December 2024. Where has in these kind of basically 4 years, how do you think Apple TV Plus is sitting in the streaming universe?
I think it's sitting well, with one exception that we've we've talked about before, is that everything you and I are glowing about here doesn't get enough publicity. They've won
Comes
all
back to the
kind of
same thing, doesn't it?
yeah, they've won all kind of awards, and that's something you're much more focused on than I am. And so they are getting respect within the industry, but people don't necessarily know how good some of these shows are. And that is a place that I think things have fallen down. I do think it's important, though, to think about, you just said 2019. So it launched and was starting to get its foothold at arguably the worst, in some ways the worst possible time, in some ways the best possible time.
I was going to say, I think it was the best possible time for a streaming service.
Well, I say worst possible time because so many of the productions had to shut down.
Yeah.
And, so that there was a little bit of slippage there as people maybe started to get into things. Then where's the rest? I want more.
Yeah, that did happen.
Yeah. So,
although of course everyone else was affected by that as well.
Right. But I think they're well positioned. I mean, if they just keep doing what they're doing, you and I have questioned the idea of the big movies and the releases in theaters and all, and they seem to have backed off on that and maybe not
800-hour-long movies. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, we've had that discussion too, but I love the fact that they've experimented. And okay, so that if they have determined that financially or based on their objectives, some of those experiments haven't happened, that doesn't mean they're failures. It just means that it's not the direction to go. If you're not trying, if everything you're doing is working, you're not trying enough stuff.
Yeah, I think they're getting into a rhythm of what they know works and what they know doesn't. Comedies, documentaries, and sci-fi seems to work particularly well. They're obviously moved into the live sports space, which is something I'm really interested in, and there is no doubt we'll see more of that. I don't know if it will happen in 2025. Depends what deals are available and what rights are available. But both the baseball and the MLS will continue on Apple TV Plus. And actually, there was some MLS Cup competition the other day, and I think if you had TV Plus, some games you could see if you had TV Plus, some were just free. So it's obviously trying to tell people that there is sport available through Apple TV Plus and associated. So that will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Apple TV Plus competes on that front, because now Netflix is dipping its toe into the water. It's got, well, I was going to say WWE, but that isn't really sport. What is sport is the NFL on Christmas Day, which is going to be on Netflix. So Apple has kind of done it. In some ways, I'm very surprised at how Apple has approached live sport, because it did it very early, much earlier compared to its rivals. Very quickly we had baseball and then the MLS on Apple TV Plus. But that hasn't happened. But now Netflix is getting, some of the really valuable stuff, i.e. NFL on Christmas Day. It's a big deal. Whether or not they can actually deliver it so people can watch it is a different thing. So it is. Hello, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. But it will be. I will be following closely how Apple continues to move in that space in the year ahead. Given that back while we're being reflexive, it has made a marker on two clear places, right? It's where you watch baseball on a Friday night. It's where you can watch the MLS, and its global thing is very important to it. So I suspect any rights negotiation that happens will be based on what we've seen so far in that kind of global terms.
And I want to just dance back to for a second to the Mike Tyson thing, because the idea that the stream went down and there were all kind of problems. I think it's interesting that it's a good thing they picked that one as opposed to an NFL game.
It's going to happen in an NFL game. Yeah, I promise you on Christmas Day it's going to happen.
I'm like you. I feel certain, and I think it's very dangerous for them to do it, because I'm afraid that could result in quite a backlash. I'm not unhappy that Apple has decided not to try to swallow some of these challenges whole. Let some other people be out there, taking the arrows, and then figure out, what kind of hardware and what kind of services need to be put in place to be able to deliver something of that nature. Now,
well, it's a very Apple approach, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. We've seen Amazon be able to do it pretty well with the NFL on Thursday nights. That I don't believe that I've seen any significant write-ups of any
No.
major outages there, but it's a Thursday night game. This is going to be a major game on a major holiday. Let's see how it goes. But honestly, I'm kind of glad Apple's not the one doing it because I think the stakes are too high.
It's Kansas City are playing, aren't they, on Christmas Day? I think they're one of the teams,
I believe so, yeah.
That's going to be people tune in to watch them.
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
I know that.
Yeah. If nothing else, just to see if Taylor Swift's making a Christmas Day appearance.
Taylor Swift.
It's not the reason you should be tuning into the football game, but hey,
is Jason Kelsey going to be there jumping around without a shirt on? These are things we need to know, people.
Are you putting in a request, Charlotte? Is that what's happening here?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I think but it seems, and also, of course, Patrick Mahomes, arguably the best quarterback going. So these are all things people want to tune in for. The load will be big. And it seems to be Netflix that has the biggest problem with it.
Yeah. But
I get it that Friday Night Baseball and the MLS are not as popular as the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right.
But it always seems to be Netflix that fall down. And Apple seem to have had the structure in place where nothing has fallen down yet.
And that's where I think they're smart. I think they're doing the Apple thing. They're playing the long game. They're letting somebody else lead the way, and then they come in and do it better.
Okay, I don't necessarily agree with slightly that characterization because Apple did live sport, basically proper live sport, before Netflix, arguably. Amazon did it. You're right that Amazon was ahead of both, as far if I can remember the timeline right. But Apple did jump in earlier than I expected and have, while we're reflecting on this year, have really doubled down in the spaces that they're interested in. But they haven't had these falling over disasters. They just haven't.
No, they got in slow and sure. They take, please, no emails. Baseball is fine. Football/soccer is fine. But, they don't necessarily draw the biggest audiences. So I guarantee you Apple learned a lot from doing all of those. And now maybe in 2025, to your point as to what deals are available, then we'll see maybe if they step up to something else.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the stories of next year, I think. And thankfully for Apple, it hasn't particularly been a story of 2024. But I think the thing about live sport is that it helps cement the credibility of these platforms. You and I can talk about the good shows that we like as much as we want, and there are great shows on basically every streaming platform. But if you're broadcasting live sport, for me, it makes you look like a proper, she says in inverted commas, network, which I think they're all starting to like. One of the big controversies of the year, which I'd sort of forgotten about until we started this conversation, was Jon Stewart. Because the thing I was going to say is live news is the other complicated thing for streamers, and Apple in particular has shown that it wants to keep a million miles away from news, including the way it ended, as so we're told, the Jon Stewart show that was on. That was a pretty sticky time, I thought.
I agree, and when that was first announced, of course, it's hindsight, right? But I was a little surprised because it just seemed like that didn't fit the Apple mold from any angle. I mean, because was it news? Well, it wasn't exactly news. It wasn't exactly comedy. It was more social commentary, and Stewart is known for having a pretty sharp tongue in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And, those are the things that Apple doesn't necessarily court as a way to get viewers. So
totally.
in a lot of ways, I'm glad that, it went away as quietly as it did. And it didn't go away real quietly, but it could have gotten a lot worse if the situation had continued. Stewart wanted to do what he wanted to do, and Apple wanted to try to hold him down. And, then it just gets ugly and messy.
Yeah, I shocked you when this news broke and we discussed it on this show by saying I kind of thought Jon Stewart had messed up a bit by making a fuss. I was like, well, Apple is paying your checks. You signed a deal with a big tech company. What did you think was going to happen? And you were surprised at my take on that. And I think I still basically stand by that take, because Apple doesn't pretend to be a news outlet. It wants to sell iPhones and computers, and it makes some TV shows. It's not pretending to be a legitimate journalistic enterprise. It curates some news in Apple News Plus, and that's it, really. So I still don't know all these months on what Jon Stewart thought he was getting into when he signed that deal. And so I thought he was a bit naive. So I kind of stand by that. But it was, I would say, the stickiest moment TV Plus has had in its kind of 4 or 5 year history. And so I think it probably taught Apple that they don't want to bother with news at all.
I would agree. And to your point, I think there was a bit of naivete on Apple's part, because you look at Jon Stewart, you look at what he's done and where he made his bones. And
what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, did you think he was suddenly going to clean up his language and tone down his vitriol? Vitriol is a harsh word, but
I know what you're getting
vitriol. At. Yeah. And so, I think it was just one of those, it was a blind date that went bad.
And haven't we all experienced that?
That will be our next show. Charlotte's bad blind dates.
It absolutely will not be. For now, we've got to this point. Rate Apple TV Plus kind of positioning out of 10. I'm tempted to do a Nilay Patel from The Verge thing and say you can't say 7.
For me as a user, as a viewer, I'm going to put it at 8.5 to 9 because of the number. And I'm surprised when I go back and realize how many of the best shows and the shows I've enjoyed the most this year are Apple TV Plus shows. So I think they're hitting on all cylinders in a lot of ways. They've made a few missteps, but I think they're doing the right things.
So from a viewer's perspective, as in, are there shows I want to watch on it? I'm going to say 8 as well, because there are lots of things I want to watch, and never mind anything else. Every time you and I do a show, I go, oh, damn, I haven't even got to that yet. I want to watch it. So in terms of the quality available on the service, I think 8 is fair. But I think I have to overall give the 4 years a 6, because they haven't told enough people about it, and I'm not sure who's even paying for Apple TV Plus.
Okay, if you take it from that angle, I'm with you. I would a 6 would be appropriate. Yeah. And so please, Apple, get out there. Charlotte and I can't do it all alone. Let people know about this great content.
Yeah, and you and I are kind of independent. We're allowed to be rude about stuff. Apple needs to tell people about the good stuff. You and I here are kind of to judge if it's good or not. If it is, people should know about it. Agreed. Well then, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, we've made it through 2024. Viewers, listeners, there's going to be lots of exciting stuff from TV Plus Talk back in 2025, when Chuck and I have maybe slightly had a break. So please make sure you're joining us. Make sure you're subscribed to both our YouTube channels, both our podcast feeds, because there's loads of stuff both to do with TV Plus Talk and all other manner of things going through there. Chuck, just remind people where they can keep up with all the great stuff from MacVoices.
MacVoices.com is where you can find us, publishing shows on a daily basis. We also do a live show Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time it is, wherever you are, on YouTube at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV. And you can keep up with me on pretty much all the social medias as @ChuckJoyner. And Charlotte, where can they keep up with all of your things? Because you do one or two things that are pretty important.
I do a few things. Head over to theedition.net. There's blog posts, there's podcasts, and there's a paid newsletter there. And if you sign up to the paid newsletter, it means I love you a lot. So that's theedition.net. I'm at Charlotte A. Henry across all the various platforms, Blue Sky, Twitters, Facebooks, Instagrams, any of that, Threads, any of that stuff. If you want to find me, I'm at Charlotte A. Henry. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all our viewers and listeners. And we'll see you in 2025.
Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.